Hi everyone, Xingyan Kuaila. Welcome to our First Saturday program. Our speaker today again is Dan Lucas. So after receiving a degree in art history from Portland State University, Oregon artist Dan Lucas worked in the Portland Art Museum Library for nearly 2 decades. Dan has also volunteered with the Lan Su Garden, and he spent 18 years giving tours there. During this time, Dan met Portland-based Chinese artist Wang Gongyi and learned Chinese calligraphy, landscape painting, and seal carving. He also adopted the name Lu Kexi. His passion for Chinese-style painting and seal carving led him to the National Art Academy in Hangzhou, China, where he studied seal carving for a month in 2011. He has exhibited in both China and the United States. He frequently demonstrates seal carving in the hopes of sharing this ancient art form, which is fairly unknown outside of China. And speaking of demonstrating, Dan will also be celebrating the Chinese Lunar New Year at Lan Su with a seal carving demonstration on February 11th. There's a link there on the slide as well as at our website. Dan also currently works as a graphic artist, and he volunteers with the USA Boxing Association. Again, to learn more about Dan, there's some websites listed on that slide. They are www.lu-kesi.com or the www.sealsociety.org. All of those links are on our website, FirstSaturdayPDX.org, and you'll also find there many further references to learn more about seals and seal carving. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dan to begin his presentation. Thank you.
And I want to begin with this slide, which may look a little silly, but it's actually very important in the sense that when I tell people that I do seal carving, this is what comes to mind. And if I tell people that I carve stamps, they think about postage stamps. Or if I tell them I carve chops, because seals are often called chops, they think about karate chops or lamb chops. And so in English, it's really hard to be sure of what you mean when you try to explain it to people. In Chinese, it's very simple. There's only one word, yin jiang, and usually it's shortened to yin. And if you see the characters, you know immediately what is being talked about. Seals we have in the West as well as in China, and they're used or were used very much the same. We used to put a drop or two of wax and stamp a seal into it, and that would authenticate that document or seal that document. And we'll see a little later that that's just the way early Chinese seals were used. But there were precursors to seals. If we go to the Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago, there are stamped patterns on pottery. So we know they were stamping things with what would be like seals or something. And there were also the oracle bones, which had some of the earliest known writing in China. And if you look at these bones, sometimes they were on turtle shell or ox bone. You'll see the writing is in long columns, which is the way that all Chinese is still written today. In the Zhou dynasty, which followed the Shang, we have bronze, and I think this particular image is from the Portland Art Museum. It's said that this bronze casting technology was so good they can't even duplicate it today. But they were casting bronze, and many of these vessels have writing on the inside of them. So they were using writing and bronze together. And the earliest forms of books in China were these long strips of bamboo or wood that were written on, again, in those long columns, and in Chinese from right to left. These were then sewn together, and then they would usually be rolled up, wrapped with a string, and have a seal on them, either mark ownership or authenticate them. So earliest seals in China were like the one in the upper left corner in bronze. And on the right-hand side, you'll see this strip of wood. You would roll something up, or you might have a vessel with string around it. The string would pass through those small slots in the wood. You'd put a ball of clay in it, and you would stamp it with that metal seal. That way, you couldn't take it apart without untying or cutting those ropes. So again, that seal was often used in earliest China for authentication. Later on, the Chinese created paper. Now, silk had been used early on, and painting is still being done in China on silk and paper, but those same seals that were stamped into clay were later stamped into ink and pressed onto artwork. And that is why seal carving has stayed from earliest times in China, pretty much relatively unchanged anyway. This is by a fairly recent artist, Zhang Daqian, and you can see he has some seals on his artwork. A proper painting is supposed to have not only the painting itself, but beautiful calligraphy and beautiful seals to make it complete. This is my good friend Carol Guo in mainland China not too long ago, and this is how seals are usually used in in China now as decoration. In mainland China, people don't use seals except for artists and calligraphers and so on. So there's lots of materials that are used for seals, and traditionally they were all made of bronze, and there would be a government office and a foundry that would make all the seals, so individuals couldn't make their own. And some of these are really amazing because they might be just the size of your little finger's fingernail, really tiny. Jade was also used, but originally it was only used by the emperors because jade is an extremely hard material to cut. And gold would be used often for kings. A gold seal might be made by an emperor and given to a foreign king. Other materials included ivory, pottery, bamboo. They used just about anything for seals. But the most popular after the Ming Dynasty was stone. There was an artist who found this stone being used for sculpture and realized he could make his own seals out of it rather than wait to have someone cast it in bronze for him. And so since about 500 years ago, most artists carve their own seals in stone. And we have several kinds of stone. There's four main. Changhua stone is one. Shoshan stone is very famous. And as you can see, lots of different colors and varieties. Shoshan has been almost mined to extinction in China. Qingqian stone is another popular stone. Again, lots of different colors. And Balin stone is fairly recent. That comes from Mongolia. I think it was only discovered in the 1970s. But as you can see from this, they all have different colors. And if someone were to ask me what kind of stone their seal is made from, it's almost impossible to tell, with few exceptions. In fact, most of the stone in China is being mined out, and so they are starting to go all over the world looking for stone. I had a friend give me a stone they'd bought in China. It had been mined in Sweden. A lot of stone comes from Southeast Asia now. So many tools for carving the stone in stone, and the main is what we call the iron brush, and it's just a little chisel. Wrap it with a little twine to make it more comfortable to hold on to so it doesn't slip. We also often use a seal vise, or called a seal bed, to hold the stone, but artists usually like to just hold it in their hands. We also use seal ink, and this is a cinnabar ink in an oil base, and it's very poisonous, so you don't want to be eating it, but you also have to be careful with it because it takes a long time to dry. But this is what you really want to be using when you're using the traditional Chinese seals. And seal carving has three main aspects to it. The first is the art of calligraphy. So seal carving is considered a sub-branch of calligraphy. And the oldest is what we call the seal script. And it's called that because it's mainly used for seals today, but that was that oldest style of writing you saw in the Shang and the Zhou dynasty. That was everyday writing for them, but it's still in use today. So the seal script comes in two styles. The large seal script, which is the older style. And as you can see on the right, they don't follow those columns very well. They're all different sizes. It's more of a almost abstract look to it. Later, after the first emperor standardized the writing, they created the small seal script, or the later seal script. And you can see on the left how those are much more uniform in size and really follow those rows. We also have what's called bird and insect script, which you can see the little heads of the birds on the calligraphy. That was very popular early on. It's still used by artists. We have the round relief script, and this was created by using little strips of bronze on the end of your seal. So you can see how the bronze might have been folded and rounded to make those letters. We also have 9-fold script, and this was usually used by the emperors. And the meaning of that is that one character, one line might be folded back and forth just to fill up that space. Very decorative. Often those seals are very large, again, because they were used by the emperors. We have the sinuous seal script, which is the most commonly used by artists. And we have occasionally the regular script. This is popular in the Tang dynasty, not used very much in China. And that's just what I would call the dictionary script. You do find it occasionally. And you find seals in other languages. On the far left, bottom left, I think this is called Bagspa. It's an old writing style. You do find them in Mongolian, and the Koreans and the Japanese both borrowed seal carving from the Chinese and often use their own calligraphy, but also use the Chinese characters in their seals, sometimes in very distinctive styles. And in English, which I like to specialize in. Don't see it too much in China, but it's fun for me. So the second aspect of seal carving is the art of design of the seals. And we have two main classifications. By one means white characters on a dark background. And this would be considered yang, or the male or the positive style. And we have Juwan, which is the red characters on a light background. And this would be considered the negative or the female. And sometimes you have both combined. I generally call them yin-yang seals, where you've got one character might be red on a white background, the other character will be white on a, well, the opposite, white on a red background or red on a white background. Just adds variety and interest. Also, the shape and the design of the seals. You might have a square seals. You might have rectangular seals. You might have round seals. You might have other shapes, just odd shapes. As an artist, you can never have too many seals because you might want a large seal for a large work of art, a small seal for a small work. You might want different shapes, different styles. Often artists will put more than one seal on their artwork. You might have like this, a twin seals, where there's two seals that are usually carved out of the same stone. Many times they might have their names on a seal. So you have your first name on one seal, your what we'd call your last name. Chinese would be your family name or your personal name on the two different seals. And usually they're in the different opposite styles. One would be yin, one would be yang. And of course, name seals, which are the most common. Chinese names are very often 3 characters. So on all 3 of those seals on the right-hand side, the lower left character is the word for seal. And what it means is the seal of that person. And then by having that 4th character, it just kind of fills in that space. You can also have, along with name seals, you can have leisure seals. And those are just seals with anything you want written on them. Auspicious phrases, poems, sutras, anything. You have studio seals with the name of an artist's studio written on them. And you can have picture seals with, again, anything you want. We have in the lower right the tiger, for us, for the year of the tiger. Often Buddhist imagery. The fish is considered an auspicious sign in China. Up at the top are some dragons. You'll often find dragon and phoenix together. You can, again, have anything you want on a seal. And you also have collector's seals. And this is what you usually see when you see a lot of seals on a painting. Most of those will be collector's seals who will like to show off that they've owned that painting. So the number of characters on a seal can be 1, often for smaller seals. You can have 2 characters on a seal. You can have 3 characters on a seal, or 4, which is very common. You can have more than that, though. You can have lots of seals, even on the small ones. They can have long poems on seals. And you can have very large seals, which are usually done just to show off. And you can have very small seals. The last aspect of seal carving, of the 3, the calligraphy, the design, and the art of the cutting, the art of the knife. And so you can have what we call a single cut, where it's smooth on one side and rough on the other side. And the artist Qi Baishi, who was one of the last of the gentleman scholars who died in the 1950s, he was famous for that single cut style. And you can see how each character has one rough side generally and one smooth side. We have double cut, where we have 2 smooth sides and the center is then cut out, and or have it the other way where the center is open. And after you talk about the seal carving, then we can talk about other aspects of the seals, like the seal knob, the decorations on the top of the seals. These were usually not done by the same person who carved the seal in the bottom. Often what we'll do today is you'll go to a stone shop and buy a seal with carving on it that fits whatever it is you're trying to say with your seal, or just decorative. There are shops that just sell seals for collectors who collect them for these knobs, and the decoration can be really amazing, and they never intend to use them to make a seal. Different kinds of knobs. The oldest are these what are called nose seals, and those are the early bronze, and again, very, very tiny seals. Tile had a tile shape on the top. Tortoise, another auspicious symbol, was used for seals. Again, a gold one with a tortoise might have been given to a foreign king. Dragons were used on seals, but in the early imperial times were only for the emperor. No one else could use a dragon design. And this one is in ivory. But there's all kinds of other shapes. You see in the lower left, the one with a handle on it. Those were for the officials who ran the government. They'd have to stamp every piece of paper, so you want something very practical. At the top, middle is a camel. That was probably given to someone from the Middle East or that area of China. The one in the upper right has 4 different sides, but top and bottom, so you can have 6 seals on the same stone. In the lower center, we have what we call a nested seal, and that has 4 different seals all grouped together, the largest to the smallest on the inside. And we have what we call a side carving, and that's any writing that you want to put on the side of the seal. And sometimes they'll use all 4 sides and the top of the seal if they have a lot to say. And those are collected as rubbings, and I think I'll have more to say about that later on to give you an example. There's also carving sometimes in shallow relief on the side of seals, and again, people collect those just for that carving. And as in the little lion, I think, or maybe it's a tiger, I can't quite be sure. I think it's a tiger from the lines on its head, so again, that fits with our theme today. They would just make little carvings out of the same stone that they used to make seals. And again, those rubbings I was talking about from the sides of the seals. Those, again, are collected and sometimes put in books. And those books are called yinpu. And traditionally, an artist would stamp one page with a seal and then might write something along with it. Today, you can buy collections, modern reproductions of those seal books. And here's some examples of some of those early seal books showing you the different styles, the designs of seals. And I want to point out, you'll see that stain around the outside edge of the seals. That comes from using cheap quality seal ink. And the oil has separated from the ink. So I always want to make sure you get the best quality ink you can. So I'm just going to show a few of these with different designs. And you can really see the range and the different sizes and the different styles. And the descriptions are down below. So let's talk about how seals are used. Now here is an ancient painting with lots of seals, and those are all the seals of the collectors over the ages who wanted to show that they had that painting in their hands. And this one is a classic example of one that the Emperor Qian Lung in the Qing dynasty had in his collection. He was infamous for using very large imperial seals and stamping them right at the top of his collection. May not have helped the design, but he could do it because no one was going to tell him not to. Here is a very famous old painting. The horse is called Shining White, and you can see all the different seals. And you'll see on the left-hand side how one seal crosses over between the paper and the brocade. Sometimes seals were used that way when they had to remount things so you'd know where to how to line things up. Here's a painting by a more modern Chinese artist, and he's got several seals across the top, and he's got several just for decoration. Here's a seal in the lower left corner. We call that a corner seal. It helps to mark the corner when you want to cut the paper. And those seals in the upper right are actually not carved. This particular artist often would paint the seals on his artwork. And I also like the way the red of the seals matches the red of the plum blossoms in the painting. So if you have a painting like this, all finished by the artist. This is an early Qing dynasty artist, I think. This is how the painting would be when it's finished. And where would you put the seal? Well, the artist left empty space on purpose, and they would use that space to put some calligraphy. And again, now where would you put a seal? Well, this is what's most common. You'd put a seal under your name. Oh, I'm sorry, your name under your signature. And here's another example by an artist, Shugu. This is the finished painting. You can see the empty spaces in the upper and lower corners. Where would you put a seal? Whoops, sorry. Here's where he put his signature. He put his name seal under his signature, which is most common. And he put one down in the lower corner because a nice empty space down there for that seal. Here's another example. A lot of empty space available for whatever you want. And so he's got some writing and his seals on the upper and lower corners. You'll often see this, even at the Portland Chinese Garden when they have calligraphy, there'll be seals in opposite corners. One purpose for this is it draws your eye through the center of the painting if you're looking at the seals. So it's a part of the design. And usually, again, when you have more than one seal on a painting, you'll have one in light and one in dark background. Always want that balance in everything. Here's a painting by a more modern artist. Again, one of the last of the scholar painters, Huang Binghun. And here's his seal and his calligraphy and his signature up in the upper corner. Here's Bada Shangran, who has a seal, again, under his signature. I like the way the bird is actually looking up at that corner. Kind of draws the eye back and forth across the design. Here's another one by Bada. And in this one, the birds are looking outside with their back to the signature and the seals. It gives a totally different feel, maybe of isolation, or being shut off. Here's another one by Bada. And you'll see his two seals down below, a lot of empty space. And so it adds sort of that feeling of calm to the painting that you see in the cat. This is another one by Shugu with his seal down in the lower left. And another one by the same artist, again in opposite corners and different shapes, just again for variety and interest. Another by the same artist, and you can see he didn't use good quality seal ink. He's got that stain around his seals. Another thing about this artist, the calligraphy style matches the brushwork style. So again, it adds to that overall design. Pan Tianxiu, a more modern artist, he's got a seal here in the lower left-hand corner of a bird. I think it's kind of fun. The cat is up on the top, maybe looking down at that bird, thinking about it. I like this painting because of the red fruit in a line, and the seal matches along with that design and the color. Chinese often preferred black and white paintings, especially in early China, and they only have that little touch of red from the seal on their paintings. This one again is by Shugu, and this is an interesting example because you have a rubbing from a bronze vase, one of those early Hangzhou dynasty vases, and up in the top is a rubbing of the calligraphy that's carved into the bottom of that vessel. Then he's painted the pine, the plum, and the bamboo as an auspicious symbol. He's put his name and his name seal under his name, and then he's added several more seals, again, just for decoration. So let's look at our own Chinese garden here in Portland. Every time you see calligraphy, just about every time you'll see a seal. Oftentimes, calligraphers, artists, they might not sign their name to a work of art, but they always would put a seal on it. It's like a seal of approval. The seal shows that it's been finished and approved by that artist. So this is the name of the garden above the front door, above the entrance. And you can see on the left-hand side is the signature of the calligrapher, a little writing. Looks like he gave his age, he was proud of it. And he has two seals. All of these originally had red painted on them, but over the years as the garden's been open, that color has faded away. But you can see on those two name seals, the top one would have been red on a light background, and the bottom one would have been the other on a white background, excuse me, and the other way around. They're, again, those yin yang seals. And there's another seal, again, in the opposite corner, a different shape. And again, it's just there for part of the design. In the courtyard, in front of the garden, we have a stone that has written on it in that early seal script, half cloud. And if we zoom in on it, you'll see there's a signature of the artist, and in the lower left, next to his name, he's carved his seal to look as if it was stamped on the stone and filled in red paint to look like it was stamped with that seal ink. And this is what that looks like up close. There's our archway, our gateway at the garden, and there is calligraphy all along both sides and seals all over it. There's one seal that's on this far left-hand side, and I've shown you an enlargement of it. This was done in that 9-fold seal script because this particular calligrapher wanted to emphasize the fact that he came from a descendant of the imperial family. So by using that script, he was making that point. Inside the garden, the main hallway is called the Hall of Brocade Clouds. This is the name of the building that you'll see inside up above your heads, and it again has two seals in opposite corners. And again in those different styles, one on a dark background, one on a light background. Knowing the fish pavilion is a little pavilion by the water. It has this seal on it. And I helped many years ago, Dr. Charles Wu, when he wrote a translation of all the poetry and the writing in the garden. He translated all the signatures, all the little writing on the sides, but he didn't pay any attention to the seals. And this one is interesting because we don't know what it's supposed to be. I'll let you guess, probably some animal shape. But this was used by, according to Dr. Wu, 2 different calligraphers. That is, he had 2 different calligraphers, 2 different names, both last name Li, but different first names. But both of them use this same seal. So my guess is they're actually the same artist using 2 different pen names, because artists would never share a seal with someone else. What we call the leisure hall name is up above, and again there's 2 seals, 2 different styles. In the passageways, there's calligraphy up above our heads, and always you'll see the seals on them. Again, in the lower corner. If you're looking at a Chinese painting or even calligraphy, what I like to suggest is try to understand why they put that where they did. It's always a part of the design. Read the landscape is on the moon gate. And again, that same pattern you'll see on all the calligraphy in the garden. On the other side, it says, listen to the fragrance, and in that upper right corner, you'll see that same seal that was used in that fish calligraphy pavilion. Inside the main hall, you will see a seal, and on, let me see, I have 2 versions of it because one is the way it looks, the other is the way it looks somewhere else in the garden. We have more than one piece of calligraphy by this artist. So you can see that they really were trying in paint to imitate what the stamped seal would look like. Another one in the garden, Drink in the Pavilion. It's got a round seal, which is considered more informal. And then we have our carved screens next to the water side, and each of those have signatures and lots of seals on them. The painted boat pavilion, the same with the name of the building and the signature and the seal. And the waterfall with its, again, seal script, that old ancient style of writing. And if we zoom in, next to it, we'll see this time written in green, a little bit of writing, and I think it gives his age, and there is in the very lower left, it's so faded you can hardly see it, but there are some seals on it. Red was the primary color preferred by the Chinese for seals. It's the color of life, it's the color of the blood that runs through us. They would occasionally use other colors, but they really like that red. And one reason is if you had a black painting, a lot of ink on it, that red would show up on top of the black, whereas blue or green might not show up. Another one of the pieces in the garden, again with the seals, the two different styles. And this is another example with 3 seals. The ones next to the name are square, more formal. The one in the opposite corner is more informal. And it also has that bird and flower script, or the bird and fish script. So now we can talk about Hangzhou, China, and the Seal Society. Hangzhou is on what is usually referred to as the scenic West Lake, and the National Art Academy, it's the oldest school of art in China, is just on a road right next to the lake, facing the lake. That whole neighborhood around the Art Academy is full of art galleries, art supply stores, art bookshops, and across the lake from the Art Academy is a small island with the Xiling Seal Society. That's the oldest group for appreciation of seals. It was created, I believe, in the Qing dynasty and still open today. This is the back side. It's on a little hill, and this is the gate on the back side. And this is the entrance on the front side. It's open to the public as a kind of a museum. In the first corridor, they have these enlarged pictures of seals on the walls, of examples of former members, of all famous artists. And you can see the pebbled walkways, just like we have in the carvings and the woodwork, like we have in our Chinese garden here in Portland. That whole hillside is covered with pathways, with caves and pools and arches, with calligraphy in all different styles and seals all over them. This is a famous, one of the founders of the garden and the Seal Society, some of his calligraphy. It'd be a place where they could sit and play a little game of what usually we call Go, the Japanese name for the Chinese game of Weiqi. And you see this is the way seals are nowadays in China. Most people don't use seals anymore in China, so they're usually sold to tourists. And you can get a seal carved within 5 minutes. And what they'll do, you'll see these with an English name on them. They'll take down your information, they'll go into the back room, they'll type it into a computer. The computer will pop out the name or even carve the seals for you now. So a lot of them now aren't even hand carved anymore. In Japan, they still do use seals for everyday uses. You sign checks with seals. You'll have all this, often a seal in a safe deposit box, which you only bring out to put on important documents like a mortgage or contract and that kind of thing. In Korea, they're usually used, again, just for artists. And that is the end of my talk. I hope I haven't gone under time, but I will turn it back over now to First Saturday.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that great talk. We are going to enter into our Q&A time because that sounds great to me. Just as a reminder for the audience, if you have a question, please click on the Q&A little icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and a little window will open up and you can type in your question. If you're having difficulty with that, you can also type your question into the chat and we will get to as many as we can. So we have a couple of questions rolling in, so I think we'll get started. The first question is, how does one differentiate between a seal added by the artist and a collector's seal? And do the collector's seals add to the value of the painting?
In answer to the first part of the question, it's very hard to tell an artist seal from a collector's seal, but there are a lot of seal dictionaries with artist seals and collector seals. So if you are an art historian, there are some very famous collectors that you'll see their seals over and over. And like the Emperor Qianlong, his seals are very easy to see on a work of art. So it can be very difficult. And it's also very difficult to reverse engineer, in a sense, that seal. I have dictionaries, all artists have dictionaries of seal script. So we take the modern character, we look it up in the old seal script, we find characters that go well together as a design to make our seal. You have to be a real specialist, though, in Chinese calligraphy in order to read that seal script and then know the modern Chinese for it. So that is a real challenge. I'm sorry, so what was the second part of that question? Can you remind me?
Absolutely. The second part was if the collector seals add value to the painting.
Yes, they definitely add value to the painting because they show often famous artists. And when I say Chinese artists, I usually mean scholars, because the same people who ran the government, in order to get those positions in the government, had to pass a civil service exam, which meant they had to be good at calligraphy. You had to be writing, and you'd use the same tools, brush and ink, for writing that you use for calligraphy for the seals too, and to design your seals. So most artists were also well-known officials, maybe famous poets or artists in their own right. And so it would show the history of that piece of art. And so those collector seals are very important, but one caveat: Chinese have always, all through history, been very good at making copies. And it's a real challenge. I showed a painting early on by an artist, well, Qi Baishi also. Many of his paintings have been forged. And sometimes people would even get a hold of a seal of an artist, and they could forge a painting and put the authentic seal on it. And so it's very difficult to prove the authenticity of an artwork. I'm not up to that challenge.
Thank you so much for that insightful answer. You had mentioned in one of your previous answers about the dictionary. So this question's kind of a little bit of a follow-up. The question is, can you recommend a good book on seal script? For example, how to read it?
There are hundreds of books in Chinese on all the styles of calligraphy. Not nearly so many in English, but there are a lot of good general histories of Chinese calligraphy, and there are seal script dictionaries, but you have to know the modern Chinese in order to look up the old character. So it requires a little background in Chinese language. I don't know of any in English, but if you look at my website, www.sealsociety.org, I have a bibliography, an annotated bibliography with all of the best books I've been able to find on the art of seals. Other than that, you might just want to go to a professor of Chinese at one of the universities or a museum that might be able to help you with that. I have some. I could look if you wanted to contact me. I could look see what I have on my shelves. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that's great. And if we'll make sure to add that to the website for references. That's great. Thank you. We've got a next question, and actually there's a comment that goes back to your previous answer. It says, yes, sometimes seals show fake provenance, even on a real painting.
Yes. And the Chinese idea is that if you don't know any better, you buy a fake, it's up to you to learn more. And if it's a fake, but you still enjoy it, then that's all that really matters. So they're very good at making reproductions.
Absolutely. Next question. How much do artists care if the seal is put on and the transfer of ink is incomplete, or if the seal looks crooked?
As I mentioned earlier, a perfect work of art requires a perfect painting, a perfect poem in perfect calligraphy, and perfect seals. Any one of those will throw off the total design, but we all make mistakes. In fact, there was a case of Qi Baishi who was supposedly had put a seal on upside down on a painting. So he just took a little brush and turned it into a little picture of a bug or a bee or something to try to sort of hide what he'd done. There are tricks to double stamping to make a good impression, and I have things on my Seal Society website about that. We use a little tool called a seal ruler for that purpose. I don't always get my seals exactly lined up perfectly. It's a part of the design. I wouldn't, especially as a modern artist, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Thank you so much. The questions keep flowing in. This is great, guys. The next one is, so if the seal has white characters on a red background, does the carver carve the characters down into the stone? And
yes.
Then if the seal has red characters, does the carver carve away from the background?
Exactly. That's my answer. Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
And if you have an opportunity, I will be at the garden next Saturday to give a demonstration of seal carving, and I can show you exactly how that's done.
Yes, and again, feel free to head over to the First Saturday website to get the link for that information. All right, we've got a few questions about actual, I think, the seal carving. Dorothy asks, in Portland, is there anyone doing seals? I would like to have one made.
I believe that the artist Terry Louie might be making seals. I do carve them for people. And you can go to my website and contact me from there. I don't know of anyone else who does that. There are some artists in town who make seals for themselves, but very few people in the United States actually are carving seals. And a lot of times you go online and you won't get very good quality. The Xiling Seal Society does make seals, and I've seen some really good work from them. I think what they do, though, is they get students from the Art Academy to carve those seals for them, but they're always very, very nicely done. Although I don't think they have a website in English, so if you get a chance to go to Hangzhou, they'll make one for you. Oh, and even in China today, it's very hard to find someone to make a seal for you. Mainland China, they don't use them very much, so you have to have a connection to an artist in some way in order to get someone to make your seal. If you want a good seal, you can always go to those little 5-minute shops, the tourist shops, and you'll get what you pay for.
I think that's a great reason to go visit China.
Yes. And Taiwan, Singapore, any of the countries that have large Chinese communities, you can usually find a seal carver.
Great, thank you so much. follow up on that kind of question. Where in Portland can one get good seal ink, seal stones, and also calligraphy supplies? If not, is there a good online site for this?
There isn't any place in Portland. It's very hard to get in the United States. I have a really terrible time because I don't like to pay to have rock shipped from China. I've always been looking for local stone, and so far I haven't been able to find any. I think on my website I might have some resources, and you can always contact me. I can give you some websites. There's a couple in the United States that I would recommend, and I'll respond by email best on that. Calligraphy supplies, again, there are a few shops, but it's really hard to get good materials. My teacher exhibits in China every year, or was before COVID, and always came back with brushes and paper and ink and all the things her students would need. So again, it's really hard to get.
Thank you so much for that and for being available as a resource if people want to inquire further. Our next question is, are there rules to the use of yin-yang seals, such as positioning or subject matter?
The most common seals are name seals. And again, you might have only one seal or two seals. If you have two, usually one is yin, the other is yang. There is no rule that I know of which one goes on top or the bottom, because it's just, again, it's really part of the design. Usually the family name seal will be on top. The personal name seal will be down below or found somewhere else in another corner. And there is no real rule about when you use a light characters or dark characters. Again, it's just really mostly a part of the design. That's my understanding.
Thank you. We have another question from Suwako. Do calligraphers and brush painting artists have text or poetry with a seal stamp in mind when they design layout of the drawing in their head?
Yes and no. Many times a painter will add calligraphy to their work, and they may have something in mind at the time. Many times they will have a friend do the calligraphy for them, and they won't do it themselves. So there'll be collaborative works of art. Often there are what we call colophons, which is later collectors and artists who will put writing on a painting along with their collector's seals. And so old paintings might have every little bit of empty space filled up with calligraphy from many different people over many, many years.
Thank you. Another question following up on collector seals. This one comes from Jan. First he comments, excellent presentation, exclamation point. The many photos really helped. You showed collector seals. Would these be reserved for that purpose only, or are they just the collector's name?
It's usually just a collector's name, but we know many of those people who were famous collectors, like the Qianlong Emperor. So they would only be used for that purpose. Although now, I want to back up on that. A collector will put their name seal on a work of art, but they could use that same name seal for any other kind of business they might want to conduct.
That was a good clarification. Thank you. Another question. Are there specific seals used for different occasions? And are there auspicious chops themselves designed with specific symbolisms?
Yes, there are, especially from earliest China. A lot of those bronze seals from the Zhou dynasty were good luck seals. And they would just say something like good luck or long life or daily fortune or something like that. Um, we're not exactly sure how those were used because most seals at that time were for authenticating. Now, I would say too, as far as seals go, they were so common. Even the bricks in the Great Wall of China all have seals stamped into the side of them because the kilns that made those bricks had a certain quota of bricks they had to supply, and so they would put their stamp in the side of those bricks. Every government document had to have seals on it. If you were a government official with a seal, your life depended on keeping that seal. If you lost it, you could lose your head over it. They were that important for those government documents. When the army went out on the field, they would bring blank bronze seals because if a general got killed in action, someone would very roughly carve a new seal for the new person. They would have ceremonies when they would pass off the seal to the next person who would have that job. So they were really important, but these auspicious seals, we're not really sure how they were used in early China. Artists in later times just use them for fun on anything they wanted to. And you, as I said, you could have anything you want on a seal. You might have a tiger if you were born in the year of the tiger. Just really just anything.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question refers to, I think, the calligraphy styles on the seals. So the question is, what are various styles of calligraphy on seals? You've shown kaishu and seal styles, but what about lishu and grass styles?
Well, you almost never see grass style calligraphy on seals that are stamped. But you do see the grass the grass style on the side carving. You see the regular script. You see all the different scripts used on the side carving, but primarily only the seal script on the stamped side. As I said earlier, in the Tang Dynasty, it was popular for a while to use the regular script, but it's very seldom used. One reason, of course, is that grass, what we call the grass style, in Japan, we call it crazy cursive or just cursive style. In Chinese is generally for calligraphy and often used when you're drunk because it's just a nice, easy, free-flowing style to express your emotions. Doesn't really lend itself to that carving in stone.
Gotcha. All right. Another question is, oh, excuse me. This one comes from Gabe. Are you giving classes in calligraphy or seal carving?
No, I've thought about it, but I have never done it yet. Maybe someday.
I like that. We'll be optimistic and looking forward to that. Next question. If a seal was brought back by a Chinese knowledgeable tourist as a gift, could or would you be willing to evaluate it for a Lan Su visitor?
I'd be happy to do that. But I hesitate in a sense because so much of the seal stone for tourists is really awful quality. They often will dye stones. In many of the tourist shops, you see this kind of a dark brown stone with little designs all around it. They use the worst kind of stone that nobody else wants, that the artists won't use, and then they dye it brown and sell it to tourists. So occasionally, people will bring back really nice seals from China. Often they have to realize that may not be of the highest quality. And if you were to get an artist in China to carve a seal for you that a collector might be interested in, it would cost several $100s easily. And if you were to buy seals Like at Sotheby's, some of the emperor seals, the early seals now, are going for $20,000-$30,000 a piece. So they're really collector's items now, the good ones.
Thank you. Speaking of collecting, are there like seals and chops out there that that people are collecting that might be from artists in history or collectors? Is that like a thing that's done now?
I would suspect there won't be too many in the United States because famous Chinese artists didn't come to the United States early on. And by the time artists were coming in the Qing dynasty and after, well, they just didn't travel that much. I mean, if you were a good Chinese artist, you had a good audience at home. So you might, one in a million, like winning the lottery, you might find a valuable old seal in a antique shop. More than likely, they're going to be for sale at Sotheby's or one of the auction houses. So it's possible, but very unlikely. Oh, I want to add to that too, that sometimes though you will find them because people went to China early on and collected things and brought them back, and they may have some really valuable seals at home that they don't even know about.
Interesting. Love it. Next question comes from Suzanne. Since the Japanese are still using chops in everyday life, can red seal ink be obtained there?
Yes. I would say every Japanese has an informal seal that they carry with them, and then they have more formal seals. And seal shops are all over in Japan, and they have seal ink there, which may come from China or may be made in Japan. I'm not very familiar with their ink, but you can get good ink there too.
Great, thank you. Another question related to Japan from Suwako. Is there a practice of visiting Buddhist temples to collect seal stamps on their booklet? It's popular in Japan.
I did that when I was in Japan. It's a lot of fun as a souvenir of where you've been. In China, they don't do that. In fact, until recently, a lot of the Buddhist temples were only recently being reconstructed and opening up for tourists. That's not a custom in China, not in mainland China at least. I have seen things like that though in Taiwan. In fact, it's a lot of fun traveling around Taipei. Every train station has a stamp inside the train station if you want to have a little book of those.
I love it. This is great. There's a few more questions. I think we're kind of petering down, but we've got time. So next one is, does carving jade require different techniques than carving the softer stones?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Again, only the emperors would have jade because it is so hard to carve. I didn't mention earlier, in English, we often, in books, you'll find they say that Chinese seals are done in soapstone, and that's not really true. Soapstone is the softest stone there is. You can actually mark soapstone with your fingernail, and they were not used for seals in China, with only a few exceptions. I think they use that term because they just use it as a generic term for soft stone. The stone that's used in China is generally called perophyllite, which is available all over the world, but not used for that except in China. It's hard enough that you can carve it by hand with a chisel, but hard enough that it takes good detail. Jade, on the other hand, I use diamond tools to cut jade. In the old days, they would use ruby dust and a little stick, and you'd have to grind and grind away at that jade. It could take years to finish something in jade, which is again why only the emperors could afford it.
Goodness, that does sound like quite an ordeal. Our next question comes from Joe. What precautions should an art student take when using the red ink that comes with a chalk? For example, how long to dry?
If you look at my Seal Society website, I've got some information about that. The main thing about it is you don't want to get it in your mouth, and you really don't want it on your skin if you can help it, because it might be absorbed into the skin. It's the same material. The vermilion red color comes from the mineral cinnabar, and mercury comes from that same material. So you have to be careful about it that way, and it is poisonous, but generally you're not putting your fingers into the ink. The only precautions are that you need to be very careful to let it dry at least a couple of days, because it'll smudge otherwise. It takes quite a while to dry completely. You want to make sure that you wipe off your seal stone completely. I just use paper towels. You don't want to be too rough, because some of the seal stone can be pretty soft, but you want to get all the ink out of the grooves as much as possible, because it will build up and dry and you won't get a good impression that way. And then you have to be very careful not to get it on your clothing or anything else that you don't want it on, because it is oil-based and you won't be able to get that color out once it's there.
Thank you. Those are some good tips to have. Our next question is, you've shown us so many different styles and materials and depiction symbols that are being carved. Are the artists who are studying and practicing seal carving now doing anything different? Are they trying to be creative and instill new styles?
Yes. That's really the challenge of seal carving, is how to take an ancient art and make it contemporary. If you go to the seal classes at the Academy of Art, you do like every Chinese artist through 3,000 years. You study the Han Dynasty seals. Those designs from 2,000 years ago are considered the best designs. And so you copy those over and over and over until you get that technique of carving down. And then you can start designing your own. And I think the Koreans in particular are very creative in their modern seal designs. Japanese have a very distinctive style, which is all their own, but they often, I want to say, are repetitive, that they don't carve outside the box, so to speak. They stick within that Japanese style. Young Chinese artists are trying to be innovative. Some with better or worse results, but I applaud their attempts.
Thank you. We were going to go back to the seal ink. Another question is, if my seal ink in the container gets too sticky, what do you use to make it a bit more pliable so it works better with the seal, giving a clearer impression?
When you're using your ink, you want to make sure you put the lid on after you're using it and keep that lid on so it doesn't dry out too much. The oil will dry out, and once it dries, you cannot refresh it. You can't put more ink, or excuse me, more oil and mix it in, because it won't mix. Good seal ink often comes with a little paddle, and you want to stir that ink around a little bit every once a month or every once in a while, so that the ink doesn't separate. And it will last for a good 10 years. If you have a good quality ink, it'll last maybe longer than that. But eventually it will dry out, and you cannot bring it back once it's too dry.
Thank you. We are going to go into our last question, and that is, how can you tell when you find good quality seal stone, and what qualifies stone to be good quality?
In Hangzhou, near the Art Academy, there's a stone warehouse where you go and you buy stones. The students get a discount, so it's really nice. And every good stone shop will have a little carving tool available, and you can ask them to borrow that tool, a little chisel, and you can just lightly scrape the surface of the seal to see how the quality of the stone is. And they don't mind. I mean, they expect that. If you see different colors in that stone, there might be dark spots or light stripes. You want to go across those because sometimes those will be harder or softer than the other material around it. And that stone will be very hard to get a good carving in. When you hit that hard spot, it'll stop, or you hit a soft spot and the chisel will get away from you. You want a nice even consistency in that stone. So you might want to bring your own knife, but be sure to ask permission of the stone seller. But if they're reputable, they'll let you do that. And then what you have to do is when you get it home is you sand down that surface so it's flat again. And then if you don't buy the stone, they do the same thing. They just get a little sandpaper and they flatten it out again.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, that wraps up our Q&A session. I'm just gonna, there's been a couple comments that I didn't yet say, so I just wanted to add them. Jim says, thanks, Dan, that was a really great talk.
Thank you for joining me. Yep.
Linda chimes in and says, thank you for a wonderful talk. And Pam also says, thank you so much, truly enjoyable presentation. So I think our audience really says it for us. It was such a great talk. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here with us. Are there any last comments that you would like to say or anything you'd like to share with us before we head out?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're asking me.
Yes, it was. Sorry.
No, I don't. I thank you for joining me and allowing me to make this presentation.
Great, thank you again. We are, yep, screen's going up. Thank you so much. Just a reminder that our next program is, excuse me, in March is about the music of the erhu with Jerry Lin. And also if you want to, again, see Dan demonstrating seal carving, he will be at the Chinese Garden during their Lunar New Year festivities. That's February 11th from 1 to 3. So if you can, make sure to stop by, and he will be able to demonstrate, which is, you know, something we can't do as much as effectively online, but wish we could. But look forward to seeing him in person doing that. All right. And okay, so we are wrapping up and going to be heading into our tea house, which again is our session to come and have some tea and socialize. This session that we're having following our presentation today is a special Chinese Lunar New Year celebration, and we will be holding a little bit longer gathering, and we'll be talking about Lunar New Year and the celebrations and what we traditionally do, and getting a chance to share with each other you know, our memories and our traditions and things like that. So if you have a chance, go grab a cup of tea, take what's called a bio break, and join us in maybe about, we'll do 10 minutes since it's we're wrapping up early. So at 11, we will be opening the tea house for everybody, and we hope you can make it. As a reminder, in order to do that, you'll have to leave this webinar, and then you'll click on the second link that is in your confirmation emails. That just scroll down a little further. Thank you for that slide as a reminder of where to find it. And that's all we have today. So thank you all for joining us, and Happy New Year, Xing Nian Kuai Le, Gong Xi Fa Cai, all of the good blessings to you all. Thank you, and we'll see you either at the tea house or next month. Bye, everyone.